250 Cherokee warriors sat motionless on their horses, forming a perfect line outside Samuel Miller's barn. Not one of them moved, not one of them spoke. They just waited. And in that deadly silence, every settler for miles around knew that something had gone terribly wrong. Samuel pressed his back against the barn wall, his Winchester trembling in his weathered hands. Through a crack in the wooden boards he could see them clearly. Painted faces, war lances gleaming in the morning sun, eyes fixed on his property like predators studying their prey. His heart hammered against his ribs as one terrible thought consumed his mind. Where was Sarah? His 7-year-old daughter had been playing near the creek when he'd gone inside to check on the sick calf. That was barely an hour ago. Now she was nowhere to be found, and 250 of the most feared warriors in Montana Territory surrounded his farm like they were guarding something sacred. The lead warrior dismounted slowly, deliberately, even from a distance. Samuel could see the intricate scars covering the man's chest, the eagle feathers woven into his black hair, the way the other braves deferred to his presence. This wasn't some random raiding party. This was someone important, someone who commanded absolute respect. Samuel wiped the sweat from his forehead, his mind racing through possibilities. Had they taken Sarah? Was this some kind of negotiation? Or were they simply waiting for the right moment to burn everything he'd built to the ground? The warrior began walking toward the barn, each step measured and purposeful. His moccasins made no sound on the hard-packed earth. Behind him, the line of mounted braves remained perfectly still, like statues carved from stone and shadow. When the warrior stopped just 20 feet from the barn door, Samuel felt his breath catch in his throat. The man's dark eyes seemed to see right through the wooden walls, as if he knew exactly where Samuel was hiding, exactly how terrified he was. Then the warrior did something that made Samuel's blood run cold. He spoke in perfect English, his deep voice carrying easily across the morning air. "Samuel Miller, I am Steel Wing of the Cherokee. We need to talk." The fact that this warrior knew his name, knew exactly who he was, sent ice through Samuel's veins. But what terrified him more was the tone in Steel Wing's voice. It wasn't threatening, it wasn't angry. It was something far more unsettling. It was respectful. Steel Wing continued, his words deliberate and clear. "Your daughter, she did something yesterday that my people have never seen from a white child, something that demands our attention." Samuel felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Whatever Sarah had done, whatever innocent mistake his little girl had made, it had somehow reached the attention of one of the most powerful Cherokee leaders in the territory. And now, with 250 warriors at his command, Steel Wing had come to collect on that debt. But what could a 7-year-old girl possibly have done to summon this kind of attention? And why did Steel Wing sound like he was here to honor something rather than punish it? Samuel's hands shook as he gripped his rifle tighter. Every instinct screamed at him to stay hidden, to wait for the cavalry, to do anything except face 250 Cherokee warriors alone. But Steel Wing's words echoed in his mind. Something about Sarah. Something she had done that demanded their attention. Taking a shuddering breath, Samuel stepped out from behind the barn. The moment he appeared, every Cherokee warrior shifted slightly on their horses, hands moving closer to weapons, but none drew them. They simply watched, waiting for their leader's command. Steel Wing studied Samuel with intense dark eyes, taking in his worn clothes, his calloused hands, the way he held his rifle like a man who knew how to use it but hoped he wouldn't have to. When the Cherokee leader spoke again, his voice carried an unexpected weight. "Yesterday at sunset, one of my warriors was dying beside the creek that runs through your land." Samuel felt his stomach drop. A dying Cherokee warrior on his property meant trouble either way. Gray Wolf had been shot by Bluecoat soldiers 3 days prior. Steel Wing continued. "He crawled many miles, seeking a place to die with dignity. He chose the shade beneath the cottonwood trees near your creek, the Cottonwood Grove, Sarah's favorite place to play." Samuel's throat went dry as he realized the implications. "My daughter," he started, but Steel Wing raised a hand for silence. "Your daughter found him there, a small white girl with hair like corn silk and a blue dress torn at the hem." Steel Wing's description was precise. "Unmistakably Sarah." Gray Wolf expected her to scream, to run, to bring men with guns. Instead, the Cherokee leader paused, and for a moment something almost like wonder crossed his weathered features. Instead, she sat beside him. When she saw that he was cold, that he was shivering as death approached, she took the blanket from her small shoulders, a blanket made of soft wool, obviously precious to her, and she covered him with it. Samuel felt the air leave his lungs. Sarah's blanket, the one her mother had sewn before she died, the one Sarah carried everywhere. She had given it to a dying Cherokee warrior. She stayed with him. Steelwing continued. She held his hand as he passed into the spirit world. She sang to him until his breathing stopped. Then she placed wild flowers on his chest and whispered words of peace over his body. The implications hit Samuel like a physical blow. His 7-year-old daughter had performed what sounded like a Cherokee burial rite, honoring a warrior's death in a way that would resonate deeply with his people. Steelwing stepped closer, and now Samuel could see something unexpected in the warrior's eyes. Not anger, not threat, but gratitude. No white person has ever shown such honor to one of our dying warriors. Your daughter gave Gray Wolf something more precious than gold. She gave him dignity in death, comfort in his final moments, and respect for his spirit. But then Steelwing's expression grew serious again, and Samuel felt a chill run down his spine. However, there is a problem, Samuel Miller, a deadly problem that brings us here today. The word deadly hung in the air like a death sentence. What kind of problem could Sarah's act of kindness have created? Steelwing reached into a leather pouch and withdrew something that made Samuel's heart stop. Sarah's blue hair ribbon, stained with blood. Your daughter left this beside his body, Steelwing said. But these stains are not from Gray Wolf's wounds. Terror flooded through Samuel. Sarah's blood meant she was hurt, possibly dying. His little girl could be bleeding out somewhere while he hid in his barn. Where is she? Samuel demanded, stepping forward despite the warriors surrounding them. Where is my daughter? Steelwing's expression remained stone cold. According to Cherokee law, when someone shows such honor to our dead, they become part of our tribe. Your daughter's actions have bound her to us. She now belongs with us. They weren't here to thank Sarah. They were here to claim her. She's 7 years old, Samuel said, his voice cracking with desperation. She doesn't understand your laws or customs. She was just being kind to someone who was suffering, which is precisely why her actions carry such weight, Steelwing replied. Kindness shown without expectation of reward. Compassion given to an enemy without hope of gain. These are the marks of a true Cherokee heart. By our ancient customs, she now belongs with us. Behind Steelwing, the 250 mounted warriors remained perfectly still, but Samuel could feel their presence like a weight pressing down on him. These weren't negotiating terms. They were stating facts. In their minds, Sarah was already one of them. But there is another complication. Steelwing continued, and somehow his tone grew even more serious. The blood on this ribbon tells us that your daughter was injured while caring for Gray Wolf. She may be hurt, possibly badly. We need to find her quickly. The thought of Sarah bleeding, scared, and alone sent panic coursing through Samuel's veins. Then let's stop talking and start looking. Every minute we waste here could be... No. Steelwing's voice cut through his desperation like a blade. You do not understand the situation. If we find your daughter and she is badly injured, Cherokee law demands that we care for her as one of our own. That means taking her back to our camp, healing her with our medicine, raising her as a Cherokee child. The full horror of the situation crashed down on Samuel. Sarah was hurt and missing. The Cherokee wanted to claim her as tribal property, and even if they found her alive, their laws might require them to take her away from him forever. Steelwing studied Samuel's anguished face for a long moment before speaking again. However, there is one way this can be resolved differently. One path that honors both Cherokee law and a father's love. Hope flickered in Samuel's chest, but Steelwing's next words extinguished it immediately. You must prove yourself worthy of raising a Cherokee daughter. You must complete 3 tests that demonstrate you understand our ways, our values, our connection to the spirit world. Only then can you keep the child who has become one of us. Samuel felt the ground shift beneath his feet. 3 tests. Cherokee trials that could involve anything from combat to spiritual ordeals to impossible quests. And if I refuse? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Steelwing's expression grew stone cold. Then we take the girl when we find her, and you never see her again. From somewhere in the distance came a sound that made both men freeze. The faint, unmistakable cry of a child calling for help. The child's cry pierced the morning air again. Weak and desperate, both Samuel and Steelwing turned toward the sound, which seemed to come from the direction of the old mine shaft about half a mile east of the property. Without thinking, Samuel started running toward the sound, but Steelwing's iron grip on his arm stopped him cold. Wait, the Cherokee leader commanded. This could be a trap. Bluecoat soldiers have been known to use wounded children as bait to draw our warriors into ambushes. Samuel stared at him in disbelief. That's my daughter crying. I don't care if it's a trap. I'm not leaving her out there. But Steelwing's grip remained firm. If you charge in blindly and get yourself killed, who will complete the tests? Who will prove worthy of raising a Cherokee daughter? Think like a father, not like a fool. The logic was brutal but undeniable. If Samuel died trying to reach Sarah, she would automatically become Cherokee property, but every second of delay felt like a betrayal of everything a father should be. Steelwing raised his hand, and immediately 20 Cherokee warriors dismounted and began moving toward the mine shaft in a coordinated pattern. They moved like shadows, disappearing and reappearing behind rocks and scrub brush, advancing with deadly efficiency. They will secure the area, Steelwing explained. If it is safe, we will retrieve your daughter. If it is an ambush, he let the implication hang in the air. Samuel watched in amazement as the Cherokee scouts vanished into the landscape like they had never existed. These weren't savage raiders as the newspapers portrayed them. They were skilled military tacticians with decades of experience fighting both Mexican and American forces. Within minutes, one of the scouts reappeared and signaled back to Steelwing. The Cherokee leader's expression grew grim. She is there. She is alive. But she is trapped. Relief and terror fought for control in Samuel's chest. Trapped? How? The old mine shaft has partially collapsed. Your daughter fell through rotted boards that covered the entrance. She is approximately 15 feet down, and loose rocks continue to fall around her. Any wrong movement could bring down the entire shaft. The situation was worse than Samuel had imagined. The old mine had been abandoned for years, its wooden supports rotting and unstable. If Sarah had fallen through the covering boards, she was now trapped in what was essentially a death trap waiting to collapse. We need ropes, supports, something to shore up the shaft walls, Samuel said, his mind racing through rescue possibilities. But Steelwing shook his head. There is no time for such preparation. The scouts report that the remaining supports are failing. We have perhaps 20 minutes before the entire structure collapses and buries your daughter alive. The impossible choice crystallized in Samuel's mind. A hasty rescue attempt might trigger a complete cave-in and kill Sarah instantly, but waiting for proper equipment would guarantee her death as the mine shaft crumbled around her. Steelwing studied Samuel's anguished face, then spoke with quiet intensity. This is your first test, Samuel Miller. Not the test I planned, but the test the spirits have given us. You must choose. Attempt an immediate rescue that risks killing your daughter instantly, or trust Cherokee methods that you do not understand and may not believe in. What Cherokee method? Samuel demanded. Our medicine man, Silent Thunder, believes he can speak to the spirits of the mine, ask them to hold the rocks steady long enough for a rescue, but this requires absolute faith. Any doubt, any interference from you, and the spirits will not listen. Samuel felt his rational mind rebelling against the suggestion. Spirit communication, talking to rocks. It sounded like superstition, like the kind of primitive beliefs that civilized men had moved beyond. But then Sarah's voice drifted up from the mine shaft again. Weaker now, more frightened, and Samuel realized he was facing an impossible decision. Trust in Cherokee spiritual beliefs he didn't understand, or rely on conventional rescue methods that might not work in time. Steelwing's dark eyes bored into his. What is it worth to you, white man? Your daughter's life or your pride? If you were in my position, what would you do? Trust in mysterious Cherokee spiritual methods you don't believe in, or stick with conventional rescue techniques that might take too long? Tell me in the comments. I need to know which side you'd choose, because what Samuel decided next would determine whether Sarah lived or died in the next 20 minutes. Samuel closed his eyes for a moment, wrestling with everything he'd been taught about science, reason, and civilized thinking. But when he opened them and heard Sarah's weak voice calling Daddy from deep in the earth, all his rational beliefs crumbled. Tell me what to do, he said quietly. Steelwing nodded with something that might have been respect. First, you must understand. Silent Thunder is not just our medicine man. He worked in these very mines 20 years ago, before the Cherokee Wars began. He knows every shaft, every support beam, every weak point in this entire mountain. Relief flooded through Samuel. This wasn't just spiritual mysticism. It was practical knowledge combined with Cherokee beliefs. Silent Thunder actually understood the physical structure of the mine. An elderly Cherokee man appeared as if from nowhere, his face deeply lined but his dark eyes sharp and alert. He carried a leather pouch filled with what looked like colored stones and small bones. Without speaking, he knelt at the edge of the mine shaft and began placing the objects in a precise pattern around the opening. He is asking the mountain spirits to hold steady. Steelwing translated as Silent Thunder began chanting in low, rhythmic Cherokee. But more importantly, he is listening to the sounds the mine makes, feeling for vibrations that tell him which supports are about to fail. Samuel watched in fascination as Silent Thunder's weathered hands moved over the rocks around the shaft opening. The old man's fingers seemed to read information from tiny shifts in the stone, minute changes in temperature, almost imperceptible vibrations. Sarah, Samuel called down into the darkness. Can you hear me, sweetheart? Daddy. Her voice was weak but clear. I'm scared. My leg hurts really bad. And there's rocks falling. Silent Thunder spoke rapidly to Steelwing, who translated immediately. She is on a narrow ledge about 15 feet down. Her left leg appears to be broken, but she is not in immediate danger of falling further. However, the support beam directly above her is cracking. We have perhaps 10 minutes before it fails. 10 minutes. Samuel felt panic clawing at his throat, but he forced himself to stay calm. What do we do? Someone light enough to not trigger a collapse must go down to her, Steelwing said, but they must also be strong enough to lift her out, and they must move with absolute precision. One wrong step, one moment of hesitation, and the entire shaft comes down. Steelwing gestured to one of his warriors, the young man who couldn't have weighed more than 140 pounds, but whose lean frame was clearly all muscle. Swift Hawk will make the descent. He has done this before in cave rescues. But Samuel shook his head. No, she's my daughter. She's terrified and hurt. If a stranger tries to grab her, she might panic and move at the wrong moment. It has to be me. You weigh too much, Steelwing said bluntly. Your weight will collapse the ledge she's on. Then teach me how to move like you do. I've seen your men disappear into this landscape like ghosts. Show me how to make myself lighter, how to read the mind the way Silent Thunder does. Steelwing studied him for a long moment. This is dangerous beyond anything you understand. One mistake. She's my daughter, Steelwing. I won't let her die thinking her father abandoned her. Silent Thunder spoke again, his words urgent. Steel Wing's translation sent ice through Samuel's veins. The cracking is accelerating. 8 minutes. No more. Without another word, Steel Wing began stripping off Samuel's heavy boots, his thick belt, anything that added unnecessary weight. Cherokee method. You become part of the mountain, not something fighting against it. Feel for solid stone before each step. Distribute your weight across the maximum surface area. Move like water, not like a man. He handed Samuel a length of braided leather rope. This will hold your weight and hers together, but only if the anchor points remain stable. Samuel looked down into the dark mouth of the mine shaft where his 7-year-old daughter waited in pain and terror. In 8 minutes, the whole thing would collapse. He had one chance to get this right. As he prepared to lower himself into the darkness, Silent Thunder grabbed his arm and spoke directly to him in broken English. Mountain spirits, they test your heart. You go down as white man. You come up as father. Trust the stone. Trust your daughter. Trust Cherokee way. If you're loving this story and need to see how Samuel saves Sarah, make sure to subscribe to the channel because this rescue attempt is about to get even more intense. Samuel took his first step into the mine shaft and immediately felt the entire structure shudder around him. The shudder that ran through the mine shaft felt like the mountain itself was taking a breath. Samuel froze, his bare feet pressed against the wooden ladder rungs. Every muscle in his body tensed as he waited to see if his movement had triggered a collapse. Above him, Silent Thunder's chanting grew more intense, and somehow, impossibly, the groaning of stressed timber began to quiet. The old medicine man wasn't just performing ritual. He was using sound to monitor the structural integrity of every beam and support in real time. "Daddy," Sarah's voice drifted up from below, small and frightened. "I heard something breaking." "I'm coming, sweetheart," Samuel called softly, forcing calm into his voice. "Just stay very still for me, okay? Don't move anything except your mouth." He continued his descent, testing each rung before putting his full weight on it. Steel Wing had been right. Moving like the Cherokee wasn't just about stealth. It was about understanding the environment around you, feeling for weakness before it could kill you. At 10 feet down, Samuel could finally see Sarah in the dim light filtering from above. She was huddled on a narrow stone ledge, her left leg bent at an unnatural angle, her face streaked with tears and dirt, but she was alive, conscious, and looking up at him with desperate hope. "There's my brave girl," he whispered, continuing his careful descent. "You're doing so good, Sarah. Just keep being brave for a few more minutes." The wooden support beam directly above her ledge was cracked down the middle, held together by what looked like nothing more than splinters and prayer. Samuel could see that any significant vibration would snap it completely, sending tons of rock down onto his daughter. When he reached her level, Samuel carefully positioned himself on the same ledge, distributing his weight as evenly as possible. Sarah immediately tried to throw her arms around him, but he caught her gently, stopping her movement. "Easy, sweetheart. We have to be very careful about how we move. Your leg is hurt, and the mine isn't very stable." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "It hurts really bad, Daddy, and I was so scared when the rocks started falling. I thought you wouldn't find me." "I will always find you," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. "No matter where you are, no matter how scared you get, Daddy will always come for you." He began working the rope around both of them, creating a secure harness that would allow them to be pulled up together. But as he tightened the knots, a new sound echoed through the shaft, the distant rumble of approaching horses. Through the opening above, Samuel could hear Steel Wing shouting orders in Cherokee. Then the Cherokee leader's voice called down to him, "Urgent now. Blue-coat soldiers approaching. A full cavalry patrol. We have perhaps 3 minutes before they arrive." The implications hit Samuel like a physical blow. If the cavalry found 250 Cherokee warriors on his property, they would assume an attack was in progress. They would open fire immediately, turning his farm into a battlefield. And if he and Sarah were still trapped in the mine shaft when the shooting started, Steel Wing's voice echoed down again. More urgent now. The soldiers will think we are holding you hostage. They will not negotiate, they will attack. You must come up now. But the rope wasn't properly secured yet. Sarah's leg needed to be stabilized for the ascent, and the cracked support beam above them was making new sounds, ominous creaking that suggested imminent failure. From above, Samuel could now hear the thunder of cavalry horses getting closer, along with shouted commands and the metallic sound of weapons being readied for battle. Sarah looked up at her father with wide, frightened eyes. "Daddy, what's happening? Why do you look so scared?" Samuel realized they were caught in an impossible situation. If they stayed in the mine to finish the rescue properly, they would be trapped underground when the shooting started above. But if they rushed the ascent with an injured child and unstable supports, they could trigger the collapse that would kill them both. And somewhere above them, 250 Cherokee warriors were about to face a cavalry charge, while Steel Wing tried to explain a situation that no army officer would ever believe. The sound of cavalry horses was getting louder, much louder. The cavalry patrol burst into view with military precision. 24 soldiers in blue uniforms, carbines at the ready, led by a young lieutenant whose face went white when he saw 250 Cherokee warriors arranged in perfect formation around the Miller farm. From his position 15 feet underground, Samuel could hear everything through the mine shaft opening. The lieutenant's voice cracked with nervous authority as he shouted, "This is Lieutenant Morrison of the 5th Cavalry. Release your hostages immediately, or we will open fire." Steel Wing's response was calm and measured, but Samuel could hear the tension underneath. "We hold no hostages, soldier. We are here on a matter of honor conducting a rescue. I see 250 armed Cherokee warriors surrounding a settler's property." Morrison shot back, "That's called a siege. Where is Samuel Miller?" Above them, the cracked support beam groaned ominously. Sarah whimpered as small rocks tumbled past their ledge. They were running out of time on multiple fronts. Steel Wing tried again. "Miller is below ground with his injured daughter. We are helping with the rescue. No one has been harmed." But Samuel could hear the skepticism in Morrison's voice. "Cherokee don't help white settlers, Chief. They raid them. You have 30 seconds to produce Miller alive, or my men start shooting." The absurdity of the situation would have been laughable if it weren't so deadly. Steel Wing was telling the complete truth, but it was a truth so unprecedented that no cavalry officer would believe it. Cherokee warriors helping rescue a white child. Impossible. Samuel made a desperate decision. "Sarah, we're going up now. Hold on to me as tight as you can, but don't move your hurt leg." He began pulling on the rope, signaling to the Cherokee above to start the ascent, but as they rose from the ledge, Sarah's broken leg bumped against the shaft wall. Her cry of pain echoed through the mine, and the vibration was enough. The cracked support beam snapped with a sound like thunder. Rocks began cascading down the shaft as the entire structure started its final collapse. Samuel pulled Sarah against his chest and pressed them both against the shaft wall as debris rained around them. The rope jerked upward faster now. The Cherokee had heard the collapse beginning and were pulling with desperate speed. Above ground, the sound of the mine collapse convinced Lieutenant Morrison that his worst fears were confirmed. "They're executing the hostages," he shouted. "Open fire." The crack of 24 carbines firing in unison echoed across the farm. But instead of returning fire, the Cherokee warriors did something that stopped Morrison's next volley before it could begin. They all dismounted, laid their weapons on the ground, and raised their hands. 250 of the most feared warriors in Montana Territory had just surrendered without firing a single shot. Morrison stared in disbelief as Steel Wing walked forward with his hands raised, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Hold your fire. A white man and his child are in that collapsing mine. We are trying to save them. At that moment, Samuel and Sarah burst from the mine shaft opening, pulled by Cherokee ropes just as the entire structure caved in behind them. They rolled across the ground, coughing and covered in dust, but alive. Lieutenant Morrison's carbine wavered as he tried to process what he was seeing. The Cherokee warriors were surrounding a white man and child, but instead of harming them, they were checking for injuries, offering water, treating them like precious cargo. Steel Wing helped Samuel to his feet, his voice carrying clearly across the farmyard. "Lieutenant Morrison, I present Samuel Miller and his daughter Sarah, both alive and unharmed thanks to Cherokee intervention." Morrison lowered his weapon slowly, confusion replacing aggression on his young face. "I don't understand. Why would Cherokee warriors risk their lives to save white settlers?" Steel Wing looked at Sarah, who was clinging to her father despite her broken leg, then back at the lieutenant. "Because, soldier, this child showed honor to one of our dying warriors. She gave him dignity in death when she could have simply walked away." The lieutenant's eyes moved from the Cherokee warriors to the collapsed mine to Samuel and Sarah, trying to make sense of a situation that defied everything he'd been taught about Indian relations. But Steel Wing wasn't finished. However, this rescue was only the first test. According to Cherokee law, there are still 2 more challenges that Samuel Miller must face before this matter is resolved. Morrison's confusion deepened. What kind of challenges? Steel Wing's dark eyes fixed on Samuel with unmistakable intensity. The kind that will determine whether a white man is worthy of raising a Cherokee daughter. Lieutenant Morrison looked between the Cherokee warriors and Samuel with growing bewilderment. "I don't have time for Indian ceremonies. This is United States territory, and these Cherokee need to return to their reservation immediately." But Steel Wing stepped forward, his voice carrying quiet authority. "Lieutenant, your government recognizes Cherokee tribal law in matters involving our people. This child became one of us through her actions. The law must be fulfilled." Morrison's hand moved toward his sidearm, but Samuel surprised everyone by speaking up. "Let him finish his tests, Lieutenant. My daughter showed kindness to a dying man, and these warriors risked their lives to save her from that mine. The least I can do is hear them out." Steel Wing nodded with respect. "The second test is this. You must demonstrate that you understand the value of sacrifice. When your daughter gave her blanket to Gray Wolf, she sacrificed her most precious possession for someone else's comfort. Can you do the same?" Samuel frowned. "What do you want me to sacrifice?" "This farm, this land that you have worked so hard to build. Sign it over to the Cherokee, and we will know that you truly understand what your daughter did." The request hit Samuel like a physical blow. This farm was everything. His livelihood, his future, Sarah's inheritance. It represented years of back-breaking work, every dollar he'd ever saved, every dream he'd built for his daughter's future. Lieutenant Morrison stepped forward angrily. "Now see here. You can't just demand someone's property." But Samuel was staring at Sarah, who was watching him with absolute trust despite her pain. She had given away her most treasured possession without a second thought. Could he do any less? "If I sign over the farm," Samuel said slowly, "where will Sarah and I live? How will I provide for her?" Steel Wing's expression revealed nothing. "That is not our concern. You asked to prove yourself worthy. This is the price." The farmyard fell silent except for the wind rustling through the cottonwood trees. 250 Cherokee warriors watched, 24 cavalry soldiers waited, and Sarah looked up at her father with complete faith that he would make the right choice. Samuel closed his eyes, thinking of his wife's dreams for this place, of the years he'd spent building something lasting. Then he opened them and looked at his daughter, alive, safe, and trusting him completely. "Where do I sign?" Steel Wing studied him for a long moment and did something unexpected. He smiled. "You do not sign anything, Samuel Miller. This was the test. Not whether you would sacrifice your property, but whether you would choose your daughter's honor over your own comfort. You have passed." Relief flooded through Samuel, but Steel Wing wasn't finished. The third test is the simplest, but perhaps the hardest. You must accept that your daughter is now part of two worlds, white and Cherokee. You must promise to teach her both ways, to honor both sides of who she has become. Can you do this? Samuel looked down at Sarah, who had shown more wisdom and courage in 7 years than most adults managed in a lifetime. I promise. Steel Wing reached into his pouch and withdrew something that made Sarah gasp with joy. Her blue wool blanket, cleaned and mended, but unmistakably hers. Gray Wolf's spirit whispered to us where to find this. He wanted your daughter to have it back, with his gratitude for her kindness. As Sarah clutched her blanket with tears of happiness, Steel Wing turned to address both the cavalry and his own warriors. Let this day be remembered. A white child showed us that honor and compassion know no boundaries of race or tribe, and a white father proved himself worthy of raising a Cherokee daughter. One by one, the Cherokee warriors mounted their horses. Before leaving, Steel Wing placed his hand on Sarah's head in blessing, then clasped Samuel's arm in respect. When she is older, she will be welcome in any Cherokee camp. She has earned that right through her actions, and you have earned the right to guide her there. As the Cherokee warriors rode away, and the cavalry prepared to follow, Lieutenant Morrison shook his head in amazement. In 20 years of frontier service, I have never seen anything like this. Samuel sat beside Sarah as the sunset painted the sky orange and red, holding his daughter close as she clutched her returned blanket. "Daddy," she said quietly, "I didn't know giving someone a blanket could cause so much trouble." Samuel smiled, stroking her corn silk hair. "Sometimes, sweetheart, the most important things we do seem like the smallest things at the time. You showed kindness to someone who needed it, and that changed everything." Sarah Miller grew up to become one of the most respected teachers in Montana Territory, fluent in both English and Cherokee, bridging two worlds that had seemed impossible to connect. She never forgot the lesson that a simple act of kindness could transform enemies into allies. Samuel never remarried, devoting his life to raising his remarkable daughter and honoring the Cherokee wisdom that had saved them both. His farm became a place where settlers and Cherokee could meet in peace, a testament to what understanding could accomplish. Steel Wing kept his word. Sarah was always welcome in Cherokee camps, where she learned traditional crafts and stories. When she married years later, warriors from his tribe attended her wedding, honoring the child who had shown them that courage and compassion could flourish in any heart. The blanket Sarah had given to Gray Wolf became a symbol passed down through generations, reminding all who heard the story that true honor knows no boundaries of race, age, or circumstance. If you love this incredible story of courage and compassion, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing tales from the Old West. Now click on the video on the screen to hear a story even better than this one, with courage so powerful and a twist so unexpected, you won't forget it anytime soon. Click on the video.